Need some help. Will you help me? Thank you. I'm going to share a little story, if I may. And then I'm going to share why that story is important. And then maybe together we could do something with it. Does that sound fair? Okay. It's October 1988, and we've just left the cathedral in Galway. And it's dark enough that you can't see the green copper roof, but you can feel its shadow. And we're walking along University Road, and about 20 feet in front of me, I see my best friend, Sean. And Sean is walking just behind the hearse. I remember thinking, why do they have exhaust pipes belching out that smelly exhaust from a hearse onto people who are walking behind it? And then we're walking towards the hospital and we cross the canal. And Sean glanced to his right and he looked into the water. And that struck me. Now, let me go back a bit. Sean and I went to primary school in St. Pat's in Galway together. And I have very little recollection of him, other than two things. One was, he did no sport or no extracurricular activity. He was always, back then in primary school, you had a lunch break that allowed you to go home for your lunch, and you'd come back again after lunch. And back then, primary school children would cycle to and from school without getting collected by Mammy and Daddy. So it was a different world. And he'd always leave. He was the first out of the schoolyard once the bell rang. The second thing I remember about him from primary school was Brother David, our principal, gave him Schoolboy of the Year when we left St. Pat's. And I never understood that. In secondary school, again, he was kind of invisible to me. Other than, again, he didn't do anything extracurricular. Always went home straight away. And then on our first day in college, it happened that we both arrived early on the first day for the first class. My sister's here tonight, and she'd attest it was probably the only time I was ever early for class in college or in school in my life. And we connected, and I had no idea in that moment how grateful I would be to have met him properly that day, and for him to become one of my best friends. Just over a year later, I'm watching him walk behind a hearse carrying his mother. And he looked into the canal, because that's where she took her last breath. But back then, nobody knew she died by suicide. Just the family. One or two friends. Last night, I had a dream that I was telling that story, and I've never told that story before, ever. His name wasn't Sean, and I have protected his identity, but it was a sign of the times back then. So why am I telling that story? I'm telling that story because it is a different world we live in today, for sure, absolutely. But it's not a world where it's okay not to feel okay. And it's not a world where it's absolutely okay to ask for help. It's not. The World Health Organization says only 1 in 3 of us will ask for help when we need it. Do you know how hard it was for me tonight to say, I'm going to need some help? Now, from your perspective, you probably go, I'm happy to help you. You're there, you're putting yourself out, or whatever. We don't know you. At least we'll tell you we'll help you. We might not when it comes down to it. But it's much harder to ask for it. Only 1 in 3 of us do. Only 1 in 2 of us who die by suicide will ask for help. Imagine, the decision to take our lives is easier than asking for help. But within that, wrapped up in all that pain, there's actually some hope. So why I'm telling you that story is, it is okay not to feel okay. And it is absolutely okay to ask for help. But we need to help each other to do that. So, I've shared a little story. I've told you why I've told the story. If you like, maybe we could work together to do something about it. I've got about 5 or 10 minutes left. So we're going to do a very thin slice of this with your permission. Would that be okay? Okay. There's a handout. You might like to look at it, but it's also on the screen, or will be on the screen. Here we go. But in addition to that, on the top left of the handout is my email address. And if anybody's interested after the next 5 minutes in learning more about this, and learning more about the skills that we can practice and we can learn together to help each other, just let me know, and I'll make that happen. Today, through my organization, I Am Here, we've shared this with 1 million people across 6 continents. And when we share it within organizations, remember I said earlier, only 1 in 3 people will ask for help? The organizations that we share this within, that goes to 9 out of 10. Now, it's still not 10 out of 10, but it's better than 1 out of 3. So after learning these skills, a lot more people are able to ask for help. So tonight I'm going to share a thin slice of it with you. And if you're interested, maybe we could spread this across the parish. Maybe we could be the first parish in the world where these skills are in practice. The journey starts with this belief. And it's a belief that it's okay not to feel okay, and it's absolutely okay to ask for help. And my sister said, make sure now you connect it with the Novena and the Gospel and the message from Father John. And I was trying to figure out a connection. And then I looked and it says, it's Our Lady of Perpetual Help. Our Lady of Perpetual Help. That journey starts when you notice that somebody might not be feeling okay. So, how do we notice? What's the thing? What's the sign? And you can shout at me, or you can say it out loud. What's the sign that somebody might not be feeling okay? They're not themselves. They're just not themselves. What else? They close down. They get into themselves. What else? Withdrawn. Everything I say tonight, I promise you, is based on evidence. Everything. I'm keeping it simple, but it's based on evidence. Do you know what the biggest sign is that somebody might not be feeling okay? Change. Because the person who's outgoing might become withdrawn, but it could happen the other way around. The person who's normally quiet might become quite gregarious. So what we're looking for is change. Now, my last car was a Volkswagen Passat. And I say that because whenever I tell this story, anybody who's got a Volkswagen Passat can relate to it. There was an indicator light came on about 2 weeks after I bought it, and I could never get that indicator light to go off. But there's nothing wrong with the engine. People changing, it's only a sign, it's only an indicator, like the light in the car. It's worth checking out, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong. So we notice that somebody might not be feeling okay because of change. Happy with that? Okay, that's the first step. So instead of walking past it, what do we do? Well, the very first thing we do is we do a self-check. So let me ask, how are you feeling right now? Just think for a second, maybe even close your eyes. Maybe there's a word, maybe there's a colour. If you want to try a number, pick a number between 1 and 10, but don't pick 7. Everybody pick 7. How am I feeling right now? Why is it important to ask that question before we do anything else? Because if we're going to ask somebody else how they're feeling, we need to be honest with ourselves first. So that's the first step. The second step is we ask, can I keep an eye on myself? Has anybody here got a brother or a sister, or a husband or a wife, or a parent or a child that you've had a row with in the last 7 days? Yeah, there's quite a few heads nodding. Have you ever resolved an argument during the argument? No. Because during an argument, metacognitively, our head, we can't keep an eye on ourselves. So you want to ask that question. If you spot that somebody might not be feeling okay because you see change, you first of all check, how am I feeling? And then you say, can I keep an eye on myself? While I'm having this conversation with this person, am I going to be able to keep an eye on myself? And then the third question you ask is, do I need any help or support? So that's the first step. It's called a self-check. Once we've got our self-check done, and we spotted that somebody's not feeling okay, there are 3 actions, just 3. The first action is called show you care. So what could show you care mean? What could that be? Yeah, just checking in on the person. Yeah. What else could it be? Spend some time with them. Spend some time with them. Hugely. To have somebody to spend time with you when you're not feeling okay. Huge. Show you care is one of the easiest things for us, particularly I would say Irish people, to do. We're good at it. But what it does is it builds the contract of trust. It can't be rushed. It doesn't necessarily take a long time, but it cannot be rushed. So show you care is when you recognize that somebody might not be feeling okay, and you spend some time with them, you check in on them, have a cup of tea with them, go for a walk with them, but you show you care. Not tell you care, show you care. It's an action. The second action is ask the question. Jim, I see you have some beetroot stain on your suit pants. And that shirt doesn't look like it's been ironed anytime recently. Are you okay? Thanks for checking. I spilt the beetroot on myself outside having a bite to eat with Father John and David and a few more. And this is as good as my ironing gets. But thanks for checking. Show you care, ask the question. It's an indicator, maybe the person is fine. If we don't believe them, maybe we go back to show you care again. Maybe we ask the question again later. And the third step call for help? Are we the help? Are we the doctors, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the GPs, the heart surgeons? We can't be, can we? We can't be everything to everybody. So we direct them where that help and support is available. Now, interestingly, this printout, it's blank on the back of it. If you want to take this away with you, maybe something you could be doing over the next week or so is just writing down what help and support is available. Darkness into Light is happening this Saturday here in Carlow and all over Ireland, all over the world. But the name of your GP, the name of counsellors, the Samaritans, just different names that you might feel might be useful. Listening to the petitions earlier on, the help that people are looking for there. So show you care, ask the question and call for help. Sounds a bit too simple, doesn't it? What do you think would be the hardest of those 3 steps? Show you care, ask the question, or call for help? I'm hearing ask the question whispered. Yeah, it's kind of one of the hardest things to do because we're testing ourselves. So we have what we call the clear skills to help us do that. Now again, tonight we're doing a thin slice of this. I'm giving you a taste of it. But the clear skills are compassion, listening, empathy, acceptance, and being your real self. Before them comes courage and confidence. Anybody want to define what courage means? Sorry? To admit you have a problem. That's really courageous. Yeah. So that's a great example. Any other examples or definitions of what courage means? Step out of your comfort zone. Step out of your comfort zone. Not think about stepping or not talk about stepping, but step out of your comfort zone. Nelson Mandela said, courage is the victory of bravery over fear. I love that. If you're not afraid, it's not courageous. If you don't take action, it's not courageous. There's a saying in Kerry, you can't plough a field by turning it over in your mind. Courage is like that. Confidence comes after courage. Confidence, particularly when it comes down to skills, requires humility. It requires the humility to know that you're never going to be perfectly skillful, but I still have confidence to go out and apply those skills. So courage, confidence and skills. Now there's 5 skills. I'm going to choose one of them. And I'm going to give you a thin slice of one of them. One of the most important skills, and they're all important, but one of the most important skills is listening. Who here is a good listener? I'm sure there's a lot of you are good listeners. Would you like to learn how to listen better? Okay. Here's an insight. And what happens here today stays on YouTube and Facebook and so we're good. Okay. So there are 4 ways to listen. The first way we listen is our default. And that is that we beat or compete. Did you ever notice if you tell somebody that you had a rat in your house? A rat? He's talking about a rat. Oh my God, he's mentioned a rat. And all you'll hear back is about the bigger rat. I'm not feeling good. You think you're not feeling good? Let me tell you. So that's how we generally listen. We're listening to beat or compete. Does that make sense? Is that in any way helpful to somebody who's not feeling okay? No. So the first thing we've got to do about listening is we've got to stop listening the way we normally listen. Now, the second way we listen, if we manage to stop beating or competing, the second way we listen, I'm sure there's parents here. And parents listen like this all the time. Sometimes because you have to. The second way we listen is we solve or advise. Is that useful or not? Well, it depends, doesn't it? Depends if we've been asked for advice. So how many of us wait until we're asked for advice before we give it? Very few. When somebody's not feeling okay, or they might not be feeling okay, don't solve or advise. Why? This sounds wrong, doesn't it? But why would you not solve or advise? Because you might be solving or advising about the wrong thing. You've got to listen first. The person who talks to you about the relationship breakdown that they're having, and you immediately go into advice mode. How can we get you back together, and how can it work, and maybe there's somebody else is more fishing to see. But maybe that's not the issue at all. Maybe it's a financial issue or another issue behind it. So we don't beat or compete, we don't solve or advise. The third way we listen like this very rarely. But this is where we need to listen. We listen with curiosity. We listen to understand. Does that make sense? That's really, really powerful when we do that. However, and some of you will have experience with this, sometimes that's not enough. And the reason it's not enough is what you're hearing isn't rational, it's not logical, it doesn't make sense. So listening to understand, you're not even there yet. The fourth way to listen, you just listen. The power of just listening means that there's now two of you listening. You and the person who might not be feeling okay. Now, compassion is a desire to act, to relieve the suffering in another. That's half of it. The other half is, but not taking it on your own shoulders. Do you ever hear that expression, compassion fatigue? Compassion fatigue happens when you take on the burden yourself. We cannot do that. Our job is to act to relieve the suffering in another without taking it on ourselves. Empathy. Empathy, sometimes people say, it's to know how somebody else is feeling. Well, do you remember tonight when I asked you how are you feeling? Do you remember how hard it was to figure out how you were feeling yourself? Not to mind to know how somebody else is feeling. So empathy can't be that. So empathy instead is to see if you can see it from their perspective. But even more importantly, to see it with their perception. So, I don't know if any of you have heard of Edith Eger. She died last week. She was an Auschwitz survivor. And she's got a beautiful book called The Choice and another beautiful book called The Gift. And she says, trauma has no hierarchy. She said, sometimes I'll have a client who will come into me in the morning and, you know, their daughter's had a terrible medical prognosis and they're distraught. And then that afternoon, another client will come in and their brand new Cadillac arrived, but it arrived in the wrong colour. But the thing is, they could both be equal in trauma. So empathy is understanding what's coming at somebody. Acceptance is the opposite of judgment. And being your real self is just that. It's not trying to be anybody else. They're the skills that we use to apply the actions, show you care, ask the question, call for help. And then finally, we think about this in the context of emotional, physical, spiritual, social, financial, work and career. Because there's so many things going on in our lives, isn't there? It's not just one dimension. I battle with my mental health. Today I'm good. I'm really good. And 3 weeks ago, the intrusive thoughts hurt so bad, like they physically hurt. And when you try to explain that to somebody, there's all these techniques. You take the intrusive thought and you treat it like an unwelcome visitor. And that's useful when it's one thought at a time. But when there's 100,000 of them coming at you from all directions, it's not as easy. So we've got to look at somebody not feeling okay in the context of emotional, physical, spiritual, social, financial, work and career. What I've covered there in hopefully 5 minutes is the difference between people asking for help 1 time out of 3, and when this is applied properly, people asking for help 9 times out of 10. Imagine for a moment, 500 people here. Imagine the fingerprints that we could leave, us 500 people, on all of the people that we touch over next week, over next month, over next year. I told a story earlier about my friend Sean and his beautiful, beautiful mother. The reason Sean got the award for Schoolboy of the Year was he went home every day from school as a primary school student to check and see, was Mammy going to be in bed or was she going to be up? And he wouldn't know until he got home. And he checked at lunchtime and he checked when he came home. And he did that all through primary school, and he did it all through secondary school, and he did that for a year in university. And he's the same age as me. And if you asked him, honestly, would he prefer to be still doing it today? He'd say, yeah. I miss her that much. But she couldn't feel that. When you're feeling unwell, it's distorted. Our job is to help people remember that they are lovely, they are lovable, and they are loved. I'm going to leave you with a thought. I was chatting with Father John and David and Tom and my sister earlier on, and I spoke about a confession. I met a priest on the Camino, and he offered to hear my confession, and I hadn't been to confession for 30 years. So he graciously gave me confession and allowed me make my confession. And the reason I hadn't gone in 30 years was because when I went into the cathedral in Galway, when I was about 12 or 13, the priest asked me, was I sorry for my sins? And I said, I am, Father, but I'll probably do them again. And he said, then I can't absolve you. And when I had my confession with Father Philip in a field on the Camino, after I told him my sins, he said, as your penance, I want you to say 1 Our Father and 1 Hail Mary. I thought, that's not bad after 30 years. And he said, I want you to say a decade of the Rosary for the priest who wouldn't absolve you. And when he said that, it changed me. A lift, a big weight off my shoulders. And then he said, you are my beloved child, in whom I'm well pleased. I said, oh, I like that. Did you make that up yourself? He said, no, that's from the Bible. I said, give it to me again. He said, you are my beloved child, in whom I'm well pleased. I said, so Philip, this is not about earning it. He said, no. This is not about after the struggle I'll be his beloved child. No. He said, this actually was said at the baptism. You are my beloved child in whom I'm well pleased. So I would say, if we could hold that thought, it's okay not to feel okay. And it's absolutely okay to ask for help. Amen. Show you care. Ask the question. Call for help. Amen. You are my beloved child in whom I'm well pleased. We all are lovely. We are all lovable. And we are all loved. I was in St. Fanch's school up in Enniskillen, all-girls school. And I went in and I said, I'm going to need some help. Will you help me? And I've been in all-girls school. They said, yes, of course we will. I said, you don't even know me. They said, it's okay, we'll help you. And I said, will you tell me? Will you say, Jim, you are lovely? And they said, Jim, you're lovely. They said it like this. They said, would you believe, even louder? And then I said, will you say, Jim, you're lovable? And they said, I said, oh my God. And they said, I said, finally we say, Jim, you are loved. And they said, and then I said, will you do me one last favour? Will you change Jim for I? And I said, go. And it sounded like that, very different. I said, that was like a Tuesday afternoon mass in St. Joseph's. We find it easier to tell it to other people than we do to ourselves. If I leave you with this, you are lovely, you are lovable, and you are loved. Thank you.